The desert wind carried voices that shouldn't exist. Forward Operating Base Sentinel sat 18 miles from anything resembling civilization, a collection of concrete barriers and canvas stretched against sand the color of old bone. Captain Marcus Holloway stood on the observation deck with binoculars pressed against his face, tracking something that made the hair on his neck rise. Smoke, black and thick, spiraling upward from coordinates that yesterday held a convoy of Marines. The radio had gone silent 20 minutes ago, mid-transmission, the operator's voice cutting off between syllables like someone had severed the connection with a blade. Now there was only static and the wind, and Holloway's hand had started to shake in a way that embarrassed him. He'd been in theater for 11 months, long enough to know what silence meant, long enough to recognize the specific quality of dread that accompanied it. The operations center smelled like burnt coffee and stressed sweat. 3 screens showed feeds from a Predator drone circling at 15,000 feet, grainy footage of vehicles scattered across Highway 1 like a child's abandoned toys. Lieutenant DeMarco jabbed a finger at the center screen. 6 Humvees, 2 MRAPs, all stationary, no movement for 19 minutes. His voice carried the practiced calm of someone forcing himself not to imagine what stationary meant, what it looked like up close. Major Sarah fucking Thompson wanted to send ground assets, which would take 90 minutes minimum and put more bodies in the kill zone. Captain Reyes suggested waiting for satellite imagery, as if photographs of corpses would somehow improve the tactical picture. Holloway knew what they needed, what they'd always needed when the radios went dead and the convoy stopped moving, but saying it out loud felt like admitting something he wasn't ready to acknowledge. "We need CAS," he said finally, the words tasting like admission of failure. "Close air support. Fast movers with ordnance and eyes willing to fly low enough to actually see what was happening." DeMarco shook his head before Holloway finished speaking. "Closest F-16s are 40 minutes out, already tasked to Fallujah. Apache Squadron is grounded for maintenance. We've got nothing in the air." "Then get something in the air." Holloway's voice came out harder than intended. "With what?" DeMarco spread his hands. "We're not conjuring aircraft out of sand." The speaker crackled. A voice emerged from the static, female, unhurried, carrying the particular inflection that marked career military. "Sentinel operations. This is Warthog 3-1, 15 miles southeast your position. Playtime 30 minutes. Heard you might need a gun." The operations center went quiet. Holloway exchanged glances with DeMarco. Warthog. That meant A-10 Thunderbolt, the ungainly attack aircraft nobody particularly wanted until bullets started flying. But they hadn't requested CAS yet, hadn't even filed the mission through channels. The voice came again. "I'm guessing that silence means surprise. Want to tell me about those smoking vehicles, or should I just orbit and enjoy the view?" The desert wind shifted directions outside. Inside, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Someone had been listening. Someone had been ready. Someone who hadn't waited for permission. 3-1, Sentinel, Holloway said, keying the microphone. "Authenticate Bravo November." 3-7 Charlie, came the immediate response. "Correct authentication. Current codes, a pilot who knew procedure." 3-1, we have a situation. "Copy, that's why I'm here." A pause. "Captain Alina Katsaros, call sign Reaper. I'm told people usually remember that name." Holloway pulled up the pilot roster on his terminal, fingers moving across keys with sudden urgency. The name appeared. Captain E. Katsaros, 47th Fighter Squadron, A-10 C-300 combat hours. 2 deployments. Distinguished Flying Cross. And beneath all the official accolades, a single notation that made his stomach tighten. Previously removed from active flight status following incident at FOB Mercury, subsequently reinstated after review. He didn't need to read further to know what incident meant in military bureaucracy. Didn't need to imagine what had gotten a pilot with that record temporarily grounded. "Ma'am, current situation is 6 vehicles immobile on Highway 1, grid November Papa 476281. Last contact 19 minutes ago. No movement. Possible ambush, possible IED strike, possible mass casualty. We need eyes and possibly ordnance. Copy all. Inbound now. Expect visual in 4 minutes. The connection went quiet but remained open, the carrier wave humming with engine noise and wind. Holloway could hear it in the background, that distinctive sound of the A-10's engines, turbofans mounted high on the fuselage, the growl that infantrymen called salvation and enemies called death. DeMarco leaned closer. You know who that is? I just read the file. I mean really no. DeMarco's voice dropped. She's the one from Mercury, the pilot who ignored direct orders and engaged without authorization. Got 6 Marines out but nearly started an international incident. They pulled her wings for 3 months. And then gave them back. Holloway kept his eyes on the screen. That means someone decided she was right. Or that they needed warm bodies in cockpits. The radio crackled. Sentinel Reaper, visual on your convoy, it's bad. Holloway's chest tightened. How bad? All 6 vehicles immobile. I'm seeing bodies outside the Humvees. Multiple hostiles, estimate 20 to 30 personnel, heavy weapons. They're setting up what looks like technical vehicles. Someone planned this. Her voice remained steady, but something beneath it suggested she was looking at hell. They're not collecting weapons. They're staging. This wasn't an ambush. It's a kill zone waiting for reinforcements. Can you confirm our Marines? Long pause. I see 4 clustered behind the forward MRAP. They're returning fire, but they're pinned. Badly. I'm seeing small arms from 3 directions. Another pause. They're not going to last long, Sentinel. Major Thompson materialized beside Holloway's shoulder. Tell her to maintain altitude and provide reconnaissance only. We need confirmation before we engage. Holloway looked at the Major, at the screens, at the smoke rising in perfect columns. Ma'am, those Marines need proper authorization before we drop ordnance on a highway. Rules of engagement are clear, Captain. The radio remained open. Reaper had heard every word. The desert sun hung motionless in a sky the color of bleached paper. Elena Quetzaro sat in the cockpit of her A-10C Thunderbolt, hands steady on the stick, eyes scanning the ground through the targeting pod's feed. 18 years of flying had taught her to separate emotion from observation, to catalog what she saw without letting it touch the part of her brain that might hesitate. Below, Highway 1 stretched like a scar across sand, and along it, 6 vehicles burned or bled or simply sat silent. She could see the Marines clearly now, 4 figures crouched behind the engine block of an MRAP, their rifles flashing in the sun with each shot fired. Could see the technical vehicles maneuvering into position, heavy machine guns mounted on truck beds, men moving with the practiced efficiency of professionals who knew they had time, who knew reinforcements would take 90 minutes minimum, who'd done this before. Her finger rested near the weapon select switch. The GAU-8 Avenger, the 7-barrel rotary cannon that formed the heart of the A-10, carried 1,100 rounds of 30 ammunition, enough to turn those technical vehicles into scrap metal and memory. But Major Thompson's voice echoed in her headset. Reconnaissance only. Wait for authorization. Follow the rules of engagement that had been written by lawyers who'd never watched Marines die because paperwork took too long. Sentinel Reaper, her voice came out flat. Target package is viable. I have clear lines of fire, minimal collateral risk. Requesting permission to engage. Silence from the ground. She could imagine the conversation happening in that operations center. The major citing regulations. The captain arguing for action. The lieutenant probably pulling up the exact paragraph of the row that covered this situation. Meanwhile, below, one of the Marines fell. She saw it through the targeting pod, the way his body jerked and went still, the way the others dragged him closer to cover. Reaper, Sentinel, stand by for authorization. Standing by. But she wasn't. She was calculating angles and approach vectors, running the tactical problem through the part of her brain that had kept her alive through 300 combat hours. The technical vehicles were the priority. Take them out and the infantry scattered. Simple. Clean. Effective. The kind of mission the A-10 had been designed for, back when someone in the Pentagon had actually understood what close air support meant. The radio crackled again. Different voice. Holloway, not Thompson. Reaper, what's your assessment on the ground? She understood what he was really asking. Not just what she saw, what she thought. Whether she believed those Marines would survive the time it took to get proper authorization. Whether she was willing to say it out loud. My assessment is that we have 4 Marines who will be 3 in about 60 seconds if someone doesn't do something. She banked the A-10 into a lazy turn, maintaining altitude, watching. I'm also assessing that those hostiles know exactly what they're doing, which means they've got a timeline, probably expecting more targets to show up. We're looking at a prepared kill zone. Copy your assessment. Holloway's voice carried weight she recognized, the sound of someone making a decision that might end his career. Stand by. The A-10 handled like a truck, but it was her truck, and she knew its rhythms the way a pianist knows keys. She'd flown this particular aircraft, tail number 793, through 2 deployments, had put 400 hours on its wings, had learned the way it pulled slightly left in a dive, the way the engines responded with a half-second delay at low throttle. Other pilots complained about the A-10's speed, its lack of elegance, the way it flew like something designed by people who'd given up on beauty in favor of function. Alina loved it precisely because it didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was. Below, another Marine fell. She watched him go down, watched the others return fire, watched their ammunition expenditure increase. They were scared, burning through magazines too fast, basic training erosion under stress. She'd seen it before, had been there herself once a lifetime ago. The radio erupted with a new voice. All stations, this is Sentinel Actual. Reaper, you are cleared hot. Repeat, cleared hot. Engage enemy technical vehicles, danger close to friendly position. Major Thompson's voice, tight with anger. Belay that order. Ma'am, with respect, those are my Marines. The Colonel. Holloway must have gone over Thompson's head directly to the FOB commander. Career suicide for the captain, probably. The kind of decision that showed up in fitness reports and closed doors. Alina didn't wait for the argument to resolve. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency. Throttle forward, nose down, target acquisition. The A-10 responded like a loyal dog, diving toward Earth with the steady inevitability of judgment. The wind across the desert plain carried the scent of cordite and burning diesel, acrid clouds that marked where death had carved its territory into sand and asphalt. Highway 1 ran straight and empty in both directions, a strip of American engineering that had tried and failed to civilize a landscape that recognized no such authority. The convoy had stopped at a bend where the road curved around an outcropping of rock, the kind of terrain feature that tactical manuals highlighted in red, the kind of place where someone with experience and malice could turn 6 vehicles into stationary coffins. The technical vehicles had positioned themselves with professional precision, covering approaches from 3 sides, their heavy machine guns hammering rounds into the MRAP with rhythmic determination. Inside that ring of fire, 4 Marines fought with the desperate efficiency of men who understood mathematics. 4 rifles against 30, maybe more, with ammunition running low and no reinforcements visible on any horizon that mattered. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres pressed his back against the MRAP's wheel assembly and changed magazines with hands that shook only slightly. Blood soaked his left sleeve from a grazing wound that burned like someone had laid a hot iron across his tricep. Beside him, Corporal Davis fired 3-round bursts, the kid's face set in that expression of focused terror that Torres recognized from mirrors and memories. Lance Corporal Martinez lay unmoving 3 feet away, and Torres didn't let himself look closely enough to determine whether the stillness was unconsciousness or something more permanent. Private First Class Chen kept screaming into the radio, his voice cracking as he repeated their call sign and position, as if saying it enough times might somehow conjure salvation from empty sky. "We're not getting out of this," Davis said between bursts. Not a question, not quite resignation either, just statement of observed fact. Torres chambered around and sighted on a hostile moving between vehicles. "We're getting out of this." "How you got air support in your pocket?" Davis fired again, and somewhere across the highway someone screamed. "Because unless you do." The sound hit first. Not the explosion, but the thing that came before it, the noise that every infantry marine learned to recognize on some primal level that bypassed thought and went straight to the part of the brain that governed hope. A deep, guttural growl that started low and built into something that resonated in the chest. The A-10's GAU-8 Avenger cannon, firing at its combat rate of 65 rounds per second, each 30 round leaving the barrel at 3,300 feet per second, the entire sequence producing a sound that could only be described as BRRRT. The noise of physics and engineering and American tax dollars doing exactly what they'd been designed to do. The technical vehicle on their right ceased to exist. One moment it was there, machine gun flashing, men moving around it with purpose. The next moment it was parts and fire, the space where it had been replaced by a crater and smoke and pieces that might have once been machinery or human but were now simply debris. The A-10 roared overhead, maybe 200 feet up, close enough that Torres could see the nose art on its fuselage, close enough to read the fury in how that pilot flew. "Holy fucking shit," Davis whispered. Chen stopped screaming into the radio. Martinez groaned, which meant not dead, and Torres, veteran of 3 deployments and enough bad days to fill a calendar, started to laugh, not from humor, from the pure physiological release of terror converting into something that might eventually become relief. The A-10 banked hard, turning in a circle that seemed impossible for something that ugly. Torres could see it clearly now, the distinctive shape that looked like someone had built an airplane around a gun. Twin engines mounted high on the fuselage. Straight wings built for low-speed stability rather than grace. Titanium bathtub protecting the cockpit. All of it painted in gray-green camouflage that had been designed by people who understood that beauty mattered less than function. Sentinel Reaper, first pass complete. 2 technical vehicles destroyed, hostiles scattering, repositioning for second run. The voice came through on their emergency frequency, female and calm, carrying the kind of professional detachment that required enormous control. Torres grabbed the radio from Chen's hand. "Reaper, ground element. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Brief pause, then. "Copy that, ground, stay low, this isn't finished." It came around again, lower this time, and Torres watched as another technical vehicle tried to relocate. Watched it get maybe 30 yards before 30 rounds walked across the highway and turned it into an exhibition of what high-explosive incendiary ammunition did to unarmored vehicles. The hostile infantry were running now, abandoning their positions, heading for whatever cover they could find. Some made it, some didn't. The A-10 didn't chase them. It orbited above the convoy, circling like some predatory bird from mythology, ensuring that anyone who remained understood the new tactical reality. "Ground element, Reaper, how many wounded?" Torres looked around. Martinez was sitting up now, holding his side. Davis had blood running down his face from somewhere Torres couldn't identify. Chen seemed intact except for the 1,000-yard stare of someone processing trauma in real time. "Reaper, ground. 4 total, 2 wounded, possibly 3. We need medevac." "Copy, already requested. ETA 20 minutes. I'll maintain station until they arrive." 20 minutes. Torres slumped against the MRAP and discovered that his hands were shaking properly now, the adrenaline converting into aftermath tremors. Davis sat beside him, and neither of them spoke because there wasn't language for what they'd just experienced. The A-10 continued its orbit above, steady and reliable, the sound of its engines replacing the sound of gunfire in the desert air. "Who is that?" Chen asked. His voice sounded young. "Who's flying that plane?" Torres closed his eyes. That's someone who didn't wait for permission. The sun had reached its apex, bearing down with the weight of judgment, by the time the medevac helicopters appeared. Two Black Hawks flying in formation, their rotors beating the air into submission. They landed in the clear space the A-10 had created, medics spilling out before the wheels touched sand. Tours watched them work on Martinez with the practiced efficiency of people who'd seen worse, watched them load him onto a stretcher and carry him toward the helicopter. Davis refused assistance, walking under his own power despite the blood and the obvious limp. Chen just sat there until someone physically helped him stand. Ground Element Reaper, your rides are here. I'm bingo fuel and heading home. You boys stay safe. Tours grabbed the radio one last time. Reaper ground, thank you, Christ, thank you. Silence on the line. Then that's what we do, Reaper out. The A-10 waggled its wings once, a gesture that was pure pilot theater, unnecessary and perfect. Then it turned east and climbed, engines growling, growing smaller until it disappeared into the heat haze and distance. Tours watched it go, watched until he couldn't see it anymore, until the sound faded and all that remained was the desert and the helicopters and the smoking wreckage of vehicles that had thought they owned this stretch of highway. Who was that? The crew chief asked as they loaded Tours into the Black Hawk. Reaper, Tours said. Call sign Reaper. The pilot's name, Tours shook his head. Don't know, didn't ask, but I'd recognize that voice anywhere now. The crew chief nodded. The one who ignored orders at Mercury. I don't know about that. Tours settled into the helicopter's bench. I just know she didn't ignore us. The Black Hawk lifted off, banking south toward the field hospital, and Tours watched Highway 1 recede below. From altitude, the destroyed technical vehicles looked small, insignificant, just scattered metal and extinguished fires, but he knew what they represented, knew the timeline they'd marked, knew precisely how long 4 Marines could have lasted against 30 hostiles with heavy weapons. Not long enough. The operations center at FOB Sentinel had developed the particular quality of silence that followed either catastrophe or miracle, and nobody present seemed entirely certain which category this fell into. Captain Marcus Holloway stood at attention before Colonel Richard Pemberton's desk, feeling the weight of his career balanced on the edge of whatever words came next. Major Thompson occupied the corner, her face arranged in an expression that mixed vindication with barely suppressed fury. Lieutenant DeMarco hovered near the door, trying to be simultaneously present and invisible. Captain Holloway, Colonel Pemberton said slowly, his voice carrying the Texas drawl he'd never quite lost despite 30 years of service. You want to explain to me why I had to authorize close air support over my own operations officer's explicit objection? Sir, the situation required immediate action. The situation required following the chain of command. Major Thompson stepped forward. Captain Holloway bypassed proper authorization procedures, violated established rules of engagement protocols, and directly contradicted my orders in front of junior officers. That's insubordination, Colonel. Pemberton held up one hand. Major, I'll handle this. Captain, continue. Holloway chose his words carefully. Sir, we had 4 Marines in contact with hostile forces. Time was critical. The pilot who responded had clear visual on the engagement, confirmed hostile intent, and possessed the capability to alter the tactical situation. I made the judgment call to request your direct authorization based on the immediate threat to American lives. And if those Marines had been killed by friendly fire, if that pilot had dropped ordnance on our own people because you rushed the decision. Sir, she didn't. She executed perfectly. That's not the point, Captain. But Pemberton's voice had softened slightly. You're an operations officer, not a combat controller. You don't make engagement decisions based on gut feeling and emergency radio calls. No, sir. I make them based on training and tactical assessment. And my assessment was that without immediate air support, those Marines would be dead before proper authorization cleared through channels. Your assessment, Thompson's voice dripped acid. You mean your guess, based on what exactly? Your extensive combat experience managing supply requisitions. The temperature in the room dropped. DeMarco shifted uncomfortably near the door. Holloway kept his eyes on the colonel, but something hot and sharp moved through his chest. Major, I spent 11 months watching people die because someone prioritized procedure over action. I wasn't going to watch it happen again when we had an asset in position to help. An asset, Thompson laughed, the sound harsh. You mean an unstable pilot with a history of ignoring orders. Captain Alina Katsaros nearly started an international incident at Mercury when she engaged targets without proper authorization. She was grounded for 3 months. 3 months, Captain. And the first day back in the air, you let her do it again. Pemberton's eyes narrowed. Major, I reinstated Captain Katsaros personally. Her record at Mercury showed questionable judgment regarding authority but impeccable judgment regarding threat assessment. She saved 6 Marines that day, and she saved 4 today. I'm not going to second-guess results. Sir, with respect, results don't excuse violations of. Major, the colonel's voice went flat. 4 Marines are alive right now who would be dead without Captain Katsaros' intervention. You want to write her up for saving their lives, you go ahead. But you'll do it in your next assignment because I don't need operations officers who value paperwork over people. Thompson's face went white. Sir. We're done here, Major. Dismissed. She left, the door closing behind her with barely restrained force. Holloway remained at attention, uncertain whether the storm had passed or simply shifted targets. Colonel Pemberton leaned back in his chair, studying Holloway with eyes that had seen too many wars and too many compromises. Captain, you put me in an impossible situation today. You bypassed the chain of command. You contradicted a superior officer. And you forced me to make a split-second decision that could have ended with dead Marines and an international incident. Yes, sir. You also demonstrated exactly the kind of judgment I need in officers who might someday command. You assessed the tactical situation, identified available assets, and made a decision based on what would keep people alive. That's leadership, Captain. Stupid, career-endangering, beautiful leadership. Pemberton smiled just slightly. You're damn lucky it worked. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. Major Thompson's right that this sets a dangerous precedent. I can't have captains bypassing authorization every time they disagree with procedure, but I also can't court-martial someone for saving lives. He paused. So here's what's going to happen. This incident gets recorded as emergency combat authorization granted by command authority. That's me. You followed proper procedure by requesting my approval. Major Thompson's objection gets noted but overruled based on tactical necessity. The pilot, Captain Katsaros, executed lawful orders under proper authorization. Everybody's record stays clean. Holloway felt something in his chest unclench. Sir, I appreciate. I'm not finished. Pemberton's voice hardened. You ever put me in that position again, Captain, and I'll have your bars clear. Crystal, sir. Good, now get out of my office, and send someone to get Captain Katsaros on the radio. I want to talk to the pilot who just made my afternoon very complicated. Alina Katsaros brought the A-10 down through thin clouds and onto the runway at Al-Assad Air Base with the kind of landing that looked effortless because it wasn't. 300 combat hours had taught her to read the wind by how it pushed against the airframe, to judge distance by the feel of the stick in her hand, to trust the aircraft even when every instinct screamed about the ground rushing up. The wheels touched, the engines reversed, and the ugly, beautiful machine that had carried her through another mission rolled to a stop with the dignity of something that knew its worth. The ground crew waited at the hardstand, ready to refuel and rearm, ready to turn this aircraft around for whatever came next. Alina ran through the shutdown checklist with the automatic precision of ritual, hands moving across switches and buttons, each movement recorded in muscle memory so deep she could probably do it blind. Master arm safe. Throttles off. Fuel pumps off. Batteries off. The cockpit went quiet around her, the silence after flight always feeling like waking from a dream. She climbed down from the cockpit into air that tasted like jet fuel and dust, her flight suit soaked with sweat, her body aching in the particular ways that came from 2 hours strapped into an ejection seat while pulling GS and making life-and-death decisions. Chief Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached with a bottle of water and an expression that Alina recognized. The look people got when they'd heard something through unofficial channels but wanted confirmation. "Captain, heard you had some excitement today." Rodriguez's voice carried that careful neutrality that senior NCOs perfected, the tone that gave nothing away but invited confidence. Alina accepted the water, drank half the bottle in one pull. "Routine CAS mission, Chief. Nothing special." "Right, and I'm the Queen of England." Rodriguez walked around the A-10, inspecting the external stores. "Burned through most of your 30, Maverick gone. You had some fun." 4 Marines are alive who might not be. That's my definition of fun these days. Rodriguez stopped, looked at her directly. "Heard you engaged without proper authorization. Again." The again hung in the air between them, weighted with history and implication. Alina met the chief's eyes. "I had authorization. Colonel Pemberton cleared me hot." After Major Thompson denied the request. The colonel outranks the major chief. That's how the military works. That's how it works in textbooks, ma'am. In reality, pissing off operations officers tends to make life interesting. The bad kind of interesting. Rodriguez resumed the inspection. "You've got enemies, Captain. People who remember Mercury. People who think you're a cowboy who can't follow orders." "I follow orders just fine. I just choose which ones carefully." "That's exactly what worries them." Alina handed back the empty water bottle. "Chief, you want to give me advice or you want to help turn this aircraft around?" Rodriguez smiled, the expression carrying more weight than words. "Just saying, ma'am, you've got a reputation. Some people respect it. Some people want to end it. You might want to think about which group you're standing closest to." "I'll take it under advisement." Alina turned toward the operations building, every step reminding her that she'd been sitting in a cockpit for too long. Behind her, the ground crew began their work, refueling and rearming the A-10 for its next mission. The sun had started its descent toward the horizon, turning the sky the color of brass. Somewhere in that operations building, paperwork waited, reports to file, statements to give. The bureaucratic aftermath that followed every trigger pull, every decision made in the moment with incomplete information, and no time to consult lawyers. The operations duty officer looked up when Alina entered, his expression shifting from boredom to something more complex. "Captain Katsaros, Colonel Pemberton wants to speak with you. Immediately." "I'll need to debrief first." He said immediately, ma'am. His office. Alina felt the familiar tightness in her shoulders. Immediately meant trouble, usually. Meant someone wanted answers before official channels could muddy them. She'd been here before, standing outside offices while people inside decided whether her judgment constituted heroism or insubordination. The line between those two concepts thinner than most people realized, and almost entirely dependent on outcomes. Colonel Pemberton's office occupied a corner of the operations building, its walls decorated with photographs and plaques that chronicled a career spent in service of abstract concepts like duty and honor. The colonel himself sat behind a desk that had probably been manufactured during the First Gulf War, his uniform showing the kind of wear that came from actual use rather than ceremony. He gestured Alina to a chair when she entered, his face giving away nothing. "Captain Katsaros, take a seat." Alina sat, keeping her back straight, hands on her knees. Standard position for receiving judgment. "I just spent 20 minutes explaining to my operations officer why I'm not court-martialing you and the captain who authorized your mission." Pemberton's voice carried no particular emotion. "You want to tell me why I had to do that?" Sir, I engaged hostile forces that were actively killing American Marines. I had proper authorization from this command. You had emergency authorization obtained by a captain who bypassed his own chain of command because he thought you could solve his problem. Pemberton leaned forward. You're developing a pattern, Captain. Mercury. Now this. People are starting to notice. Sir, with respect, people also notice that 12 Marines are alive because I didn't wait for perfect paperwork. 12, Pemberton's eyebrows rose. 6 at Mercury, for today. 2 more who probably would have died from blood loss if the medevac had been delayed another 20 minutes. Elena kept her voice level. I understand that my methods create complications for command. I understand that I make people uncomfortable. But I'm a close air support pilot, sir. My job is keeping infantry alive, not making operations officers comfortable. The silence stretched between them. Pemberton studied her with eyes that had spent decades evaluating officers, separating confidence from arrogance, courage from recklessness. Finally, he nodded. That's a good answer, Captain. Also a dangerous one. You know why? Because it assumes I'm always right, sir. Exactly. Every pilot who's ever bent rules thinks they're the exception, thinks their judgment is special. Most of them are wrong. Some of them die proving it. A few kill others proving it. He paused. You've been lucky so far. Your judgment's been good. But luck runs out, and when it does, you'll be standing in front of someone explaining why your certainty got people killed. Elena absorbed the words without flinching. Sir, I don't operate on luck. I operate on training and assessment. When I engaged at Mercury, I had positive identification of hostile forces attacking a friendly position. When I engaged today, I had the same. Both times, I had Marines who needed help immediately. Both times, I provided it. Both times, you also had orders to stand by. Yes, sir. Both times, those orders would have resulted in dead Americans. Pemberton leaned back. You really believe that? That you know better than the operations officers and colonels and generals who write these rules? No, sir. I believe the people on the ground know better. The Marines taking fire know better. The infantry calling for help knows better. I'm just the person who listens to them instead of headquarters. Elena met his eyes directly. Sir, you reinstated me after Mercury. You could have ended my career. You didn't. You sent me back into combat because you believed I'd been right. Was that judgment wrong? Long pause. Then Pemberton smiled just slightly. You're very good at this, Captain, at making your insubordination sound like moral courage. It's an impressive skill. It's not insubordination if it saves lives, sir. It's just competence delivered faster than bureaucracy can handle. The colonel laughed, the sound genuine and surprising. Christ, you really believe that, don't you? You actually think you're doing the right thing. I know I am, sir. That's what worries me, Captain, that certainty, that conviction that your judgment supersedes command authority. But his voice had softened. It's also what makes you an exceptional pilot. You don't hesitate, you don't second guess. You see what needs doing and you do it. That's rare. It's also dangerous as hell. Elena remained silent, sensing that the conversation had reached its inflection point. That whatever came next would determine whether she walked out of this office with a commendation or a court-martial. Pemberton pulled out a folder, flipped it open. Your record is complicated, Captain. 300 combat hours, Distinguished Flying Cross, 2 air medals, also 1 official reprimand, 1 period of grounded status, and enough incident reports to fill a file cabinet. Half the people who have commanded you think you're the best pilot they've seen. The other half think you're a liability waiting to happen. He looked up. Which one are you? Both, sir, probably. The corner of the colonel's mouth twitched. At least you're honest. All right, Captain, here's my assessment. You've got exceptional skills and terrible judgment regarding authority. You save lives, but you also create nightmares for everyone trying to command you. You're exactly the kind of officer the military needs in combat and dreads in peacetime. He closed the folder. Which means I'm going to keep using you until either the war ends or you finally push too far. Clear. Crystal, sir. Good. Now get out of my office and go write up your mission report. Try to make it sound like you followed orders. For my sake. Elena stood, saluted, turned toward the door. Captain, Pemberton's voice stopped her. Those 4 Marines you pulled out today. Staff Sergeant Torres specifically asked me to pass along his thanks. Said he'd recognize your voice anywhere now. Said you were the most beautiful thing he'd ever heard. Something in Elena's chest tightened. She'd flown 300 combat hours, had dropped enough ordnance to level a small city, had saved lives and ended them in equal measure. But somehow, that statement from a sergeant she'd never met, probably would never meet, hit differently than any commendation or medal. Sir, I was just doing my job. Yeah, that's what he said too. Funny how the people doing their jobs always think it's not special. Pemberton waved her away. Dismissed, Captain. The sun had set by the time Elena finished her mission report, the sky outside the operations building gone purple and then black, stars emerging in numbers that city people never saw. She sat alone in the briefing room, staring at words on a screen that tried and failed to capture what had actually happened over Highway 1. How do you describe